Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet? Has to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others. As for me, give me liberty, or give me death.
It's showtime.
Psychically, I'm very well endowed.
I want to know what you're thinking. There are some things you can't hide. I want to know what you're feeling. Tell me what's on your mind.
Hey there, it's Scoop from Telepathic Bunny Comics. Give me 1 minute. I need to switch browsers right quick. Be right back. Alrighty, I'm back. Sorry about that. I opened it with the wrong browser, so hopefully everybody's not gone. Um, That was a really dumb move on my part. The problem is if I use the browser that I had open, then it would be starts and stops, and it would be a bad experience. But somebody popping completely out and then coming back probably isn't the best experience, you know. So if anybody's still there after that faux pas, I don't see any comments and I don't see any eyes, but we're just going to have to hope that somebody's out there. Maybe I'm doing this for posterity. Anyway, nothing to review today. I'm moving, my reviews are going to be on the Monday show. That's where their permanent home's going to be. And this show is going to be just all about what's next, all about looking for trends, looking for, the important next steps, things that we need to talk about, when you're talking about the future, talking about the next thing. And anyway, so what's next is one of the subject that I want to talk about today. Hopefully, maybe I'll have some panel members pop in, but we're going to talk about having a parallel history. Okay, why is this important? Okay, now one of the things that one of the histories that one of the misconceptions about history that we hear about all the time is the baby boomer generation have developed their own mythos. Okay, mainly because they took over the culture, and because they took over the culture, they were able to write their history, rewrite their history. Actually, they call themselves the flower power generation, the anti-war generation, and all their music was like still being played in constant rotation today, and they are like viewed as like the creme de la creme. Okay, the best thing that's ever happened to humanity. Everybody talk about the best band ever was the Beatles, and they wax on and wax on and wax on about the Beatles. And, I've never really found the Beatles all that compelling. So is there something wrong with me? Well, the thing about it is one of the mythos that they like to talk about, this whole anti-war. We ended the Vietnam War. And yet, when you look at when they did their protest songs, when they did their protest activity, when they're like sleeping in beds out in the middle of Central Park, or marching, or holding their concerts, end war, end war, except when the soldiers came home, they treated them like crap. This generation that was supposedly anti-war turned into anti-soldier. Does that make any logical sense to you? Because the guys that were sent over to Vietnam, very few of them were volunteers. Most of them were draftees. So why in the world, when they got back over here, were they treated like crap? One of the reasons is John Kerry coming home with his Purple Hearts that he earned from paper cuts, and called up a bunch of baby killers and set up this narrative that the soldiers that went over there were murdering people. Kind of like the whole Israeli Gaza thing going on right now. I can't scroll through my feed on X without getting like ambushed by some horrific piece of footage, right? And so I'm supposed to like take this out of context and draw a conclusion, which is what happened. A lot of soldiers that came home, and a lot of them were my uncles. One of my uncles was over there. I had my mother's first cousin died over there, less than a year in country. Great guy. A lot of people to this day, even though he died way back in like 70, still talk about him. He was that amazing of a person, but got sent over there. He was freshly married, and he got sent overseas, Vietnam. and he died from small arms fire. He was a radio man. Conscientious objector, decided to be a radio man, and got shot while he was out with his platoon, and won a good conduct medal and everything. Great guy. But if he made it back home, they would have spit on him too. I mean, soldiers that came back from Vietnam wouldn't wear their uniforms. Try to hide the fact that they were veterans, and some of them to this day carry the wounds around. But that was the flower power generation, the best generation ever. And guess what? They're the ones ruling Congress right now. They're the ones that are making all these decisions, right? They're the baby boomers. And but when you look at when these protest songs, when these things were happening, they only happened during Republican administrations. Really. Look it out. Check it out. When there was a Democrat administration, even though the Democrats were just as responsible for Vietnam and sending people over there, when there was a Democrat in power, all these protest songs we heard, all that protest activity went away when the Democrats were in charge. So if they really had that belief, then why the hell didn't they consistent all the way through every administration? It went through nearly 5 administrations. And if you look, all the protest activity happened during the Republican administrations. The rest of the time it's like, oh, we're good with it as long as the right person's in charge. It's like what was that, the Summer of Love? Oh, it's just protest. They're peaceful protesting. But then it's like J6. Oh my God, J6, J6, J6. Bunch of people took an unauthorized tour of the Capitol, and it was the end of the world as we know it. And it's like, oh, it's worse than 9/11. Literally said that. Worse than 9/11. Literally says that. But you see all these narratives that get set up, right? And the baby boomers, they won the culture war, and they've pretty much been writing the narratives ever since. And if you look, they wrote it slanted in their favor. The people who went through the blacklisting, right? Now they're like, oh, we were blacklisted, blah, blah, blah. And yet they were still winning Oscars. They were still getting work. They never stopped working. They just used pseudonyms. But they still got work from Hollywood. They still got Oscars. And they didn't really suffer. The blacklist was just basically in name only. They did, Hollywood did it to acquiesce and say, well, we're taking care of the communist problem. But you know what? As soon as it became, culturally friendly to do so, boom, back into the warm embrace of their colleagues. And you know what? The truth is, most of the people on that blacklist have since been proven to be communist. So the blacklist wasn't wrong. They were communist. But because the baby boomers and the ones who were against the anti-blacklist and the blacklisters are writing the narratives now. And so now it's just become this, it's McCarthyism. Yeah, and it's like just witch hunt by any other name. You know what? Joseph McCarthy was right. He was right. But they won the war, so they're writing the narratives, right? I used to believe Abraham Lincoln was the most godly and wonderful president ever, even though I live in the South, and we call it the War of Northern Aggression. But the more I've looked into it, Razor Fist, did a show on this, and it kind of snapped me out of it because I had some misgivings about some things that Lincoln did over the years, but I kind of oh, well, the narrative is Lincoln's the greatest president ever. He freed the slaves. He didn't free the slaves. He didn't. The Emancipation Proclamation declared slavery illegal only in the South. but the North won the war, and so they wrote the narratives, and suddenly all this things sanitized, and Abraham Lincoln became Jesus Christ incarnate, reincarnated, and but the truth of the matter is that life and things are a lot more complicated, right? And so, when we look at today, when we look at what's happened in the last few years, the culture war, okay? In the culture war, this morning, one of the things that got me kind of thinking along these lines was somebody made a statement about Kathleen Kennedy is going to be fired and she is going to be, dismissed and disgraced. And I kind of pushed back against that. I was like, you know what? Kathleen Kennedy's going to go out the door whenever the hell she wants to. She'll retire. She'll never be fired. She'll retire. And once she goes, she is going to be thrown accolades. There's going to be accolades thrown at her. So there's going to be retrospectives of her entire career, even though all she did was grab coffee, when Spielberg and Lucas and were creating their magic. She grabbed coffee and annoyed them with out of place suggestions. According to them, that's what she did. She was their gopher girl, and because of that, she got producer credits on all these awesome movies. But if I were to show up on on a movie set, and I were to make some kind of decision based that impacted the movie in some way, even if it's just catering, I would get a producer credit. And so producer credits don't mean crap unless you're the executive producer. And she was executive producer very rarely on any of these movies. But because they wanted to build her up, they're always like, oh, she's the producer, executive producer, or she's producer of this, and this, and this, and this. And so it's like, oh, wow, really? Wow, she was producer on E.T.? Oh, my gosh. That was an incredible movie. Maybe she knows what she's doing. Nope, she does not. She's proven that over and over again. But once she decides to retire, she will be retired with privileges, with kudos, with flowers falling from the sky, and she'll be, on the way out the door. They'll rewrite everything about this incredible, studio head, this female, the first female studio head, just what a big impact she made just by having the JJ and being in the position. And suddenly it's like, oh, she's brave, and she was this, she was that. Even though she's been privileged her entire life, and she's never worked a damn day job in her entire existence. She's a rich girl. She grew up rich. That's how she was able to be an intern and a producer for so long. It's because she's never had to have a job her whole entire life. And so the struggle that they talk about, the struggle and how she worked her way up through the patriarchy and got her position. She got it handed to her, okay? But what happened is, at the moment, she's part of the upper echelon of the pop culture, so she can write that narrative. However, those of us who used to love things that Lucasfilm produced know the truth about her competency, and know the truth about just what kind of game that she plays, right? And what's she doing now? The Acolyte is coming out, and it by all information we have, it's going to be god awful. It's going to be absolutely awful. The showrunner happens to be Leslie Headland, Harvey Weinstein's right-hand girl who got away with it. Nobody ever bats an eye about that. The fact she groomed people and set people up for Harvey Weinstein's little casting couch, and she completely, totally has gotten out scot-free. And oh, by the way, she got a job. And now she's show running The Acolyte, and it's going to be woke feminist garbage. By every metric that we are told, all the things that even they say, point in that direction, and it's going to fail. It's going to fail. It's going to fail. All the rewrites and all the reshoots that they've done for 4 years to try to get this out, and it's going to drop like like buffalo dung. Okay, it's going to drop, and it's just going to like bleh. It's going to just be dropped on the streaming service, and it's going to be a stinker, and you can already see it coming a mile away. Maybe there's an outside chance that it's going to be decent. But of course, if you start out with bad ingredients, and they got bad writers, they got bad showrunner, all the actresses, not actors. I mean, there's like 2 actors in the whole thing, but all the actresses have run their mouth all over social media, and how proud they are to be an activist, blah blah blah, and the whole thing was built around this one girl who has been very vocal on social media, letting all this patriarchal assholes know where our place is, and she's who they built the whole thing around. So one can surmise that the thing's going to be god awful. Okay, you can't like make souffle with starting with dog crap. You can't make a chocolate souffle starting with dog crap. You just can't. We given bad ingredients, the end product is going to be awful. You start with bad stuff, you put bad stuff in, you're not going to get gold out the other end. This is not Rumpelstiltskin, okay? Now, so what's going to happen in the future? Okay. Now we know that all these narratives are being pushed by the media, the mainstream media. They get their narrative. You see this compilation of all of them, like, all these news outlets, including Fox News, okay, including Fox News, and they'll like put them side by side, and they'll all be saying the same phrase. I've seen it. The first time I saw it, it gave me chill bumps. Okay, but they're all saying the same thing, right? Why? Because they all have the same narrative that they're pushing. Whether it's a confirmation bias that caused them all to land in the same place, or whether it has something to do with them being given marching orders, I can't even speculate. Okay, because it all looks the same. If you're all part of the same religion, then you're all going to talk about the same God, and you're all going to be talking about the same religion with the same religiosity. Okay, and so whether it's coordinated or whether somebody is, or whether it's just a belief system that's spread all the way across and everybody parrots the same thing, it all looks the same. It looks the same, exactly. Well, my belief is it's a belief system. I don't give people too much credit, and I don't give people enough. I don't like giving them too much credit or too little credit. I think the truth's always in the middle somewhere. And so, basically, in the future, we're going to be told that this is the golden age of television and movies, and we're going to, and streaming, what a golden age it was. We're going to be told all these awesome shows that came out, but because of COVID, or because of social mores, because of the MAGA people, maybe they may probably blame it on Trump. I'm pretty sure they'll blame it on Trump. But because of that, when you see how Disney has spun their failure at the box office, they said it was because we shifted and the customer didn't go with us. In other words, it's the customer's fault. We didn't make a mistake. They just failed to meet us where we shifted to. And so it's not our fault. It's the customer. And you see this over and over again. Okay. It's called propaganda. It's called narrative building. and they all do it. Well, but in the future, when you look back on this day, what is going to be the history? What are they going to be teaching now, those history books? Are they going to be talking about a golden age? Or are they going to be talking about this disaster of a program called ESG put into place by Larry Fink that forced social change on society, and it was rejected soundly? Are they going to talk about that? They don't talk about it now. They don't talk about ESG and its long and the fact that ESG is also destroying our petroleum. Our petroleum exports. ESG has been used to like destroy a lot of stuff, and it's basically a slush fund for behaving. If you behave in the approved way, then you get this money, who is paid for by and right. That's who's paying for it. We're basically, it's the BBC model. We're basically paying for the destruction of our pop culture and our entertainment. We're paying for the privilege of watching it go down in flames. Isn't that lovely? They basically took the customer out of it, and they throw money at these people and say, you no longer have to please the customer. You have to meet these criterion. Get yourself a DEI director, diversity, equity, inclusion, follow their principles. And if you do it close enough, if you hire people for your video game, like Sweet Baby Inc., which is propped up by the Canadian government, and they'll tell you how to fit the ESG parameters. And you fit those ESG parameters and maybe even get a bonus by hiring these people. And ta-da, you'll get the money. Okay? Well, the problem is, where's the customer in that exchange? The customer's nowhere in that exchange. They don't care about the customer. Well, the problem is any kind of fund is going to run out. That's not replenished. Okay? And if you don't replenish it fast enough for all the money coming out, and everybody's dipping into this same pot, then it's going to go dry. And suddenly people are going to ask, that margin call is going to come in. And that's what's happening with ESG. And now suddenly all these people who followed the Pied Piper down the ESG, toilet and lost their customer base, pissed off their customer base, or actively, told the customer base to F off, which has happened a lot. And but at the end of the day, they got low ratings, they got empty movie theaters, and the cultural impact has gone elsewhere. Now, the only way for future generations to know that about this failed experiment, the only way future generations will know about how entertainment just went down the tubes and why. The only way the future generations will know the death of the mainstream, why the mainstream died, and why the counterculture became the culture, is if the counterculture becomes the culture and writes the narrative. Now, that's why I'm talking about what's next. What's next? Well, what's next is we've got to start correcting the record. We've got to start reaching out and saying, okay, this is what really happened. Okay. And there's this documentary right now on the Star Cruiser. Now, evidently, Bob Iger has resurrected the Star Cruiser. They're going to repurpose it, and they're going to relaunch it. But the Star Cruiser lasted 18 months. And it was 18 months of apathy and empty. It's practically stayed empty for 18 months, okay? Why? Because it was a live-action role play. LARP. That's what they call it, LARPing. And that's not something that everybody is into. Very few niche people are into LARPing, okay? Mainly because it's theater kids theater kids and nerds that do the LARPing or whatever. And so they thought that they had enough theater kids and nerds to keep the thing open. And by all accounts, basically you were like, if you paid for 2 nights on this thing, you wound up paying like $6,000 for 2 people. I think it was like 3,000 for one, something like that. There might have been discounts for more people. And they take you in a panel van, which is supposed to be your shuttle, to this motel or this starship or whatever, and then you're ushered in at night, and basically you were given like these cramped cabin quarters, and you had to go a certain place at a certain time for to get your meal, and then you can only eat a certain time, and then you had to go somewhere else. And first of all, you had to like create your character, and basically decide what your character is, and that's what they were going to call you the whole time. And then you would go through this whole entire thing where you had to follow this plot line, okay? And you had to go make sure you were at this part or you wouldn't get the rest of the plot. And you had to like attend this concert, and then there was this like I guess a few hours a day they would turn you loose, but you had to stay inside the Star Wars park there, the Galaxy's Edge park. And then you had to basically frequent the Galaxy's Edge park. That's what then you had to be back at a certain time so you didn't wander off. And you were paying $6,000 or $3,000 per person for this privilege to do this, okay? And then, at the end of it, you were basically stuck in the shuttle and dropped off at the end of the plot or whatever, at the conclusion of the plot or whatever. And everything was just like, all the leaks were just god awful. I mean, the music was awful. The interior looked like something out of mid-90s Star Trek. Okay. Looked like the Enterprise in mid-90s, next generation Star Trek. And it didn't look like Star Wars at all. Okay. And everybody that went to it, that saw the inside, has said this. But this girl has made a documentary on it, the Star Cruiser. And it's a 4-hour documentary. And this is a girl that actually went there, paid the price for this experience. And she came back. She just wanted to give a review of it. But then it turns out, she was one of the last customers and the thing closed. And so she's been working on this ever since. Didn't know that they're about to relaunch it. But she put out this 4-hour video, breaking down what went wrong with the Star Cruiser. And last I checked, and I checked just a minute ago, she had over 6.5 million views on this video. Why? Because she's giving factual evidence. She's not doing the narrative. She's not giving the talking points handed to her by, the mouse. She's basically, I went there. I saw it firsthand. This is what I experienced. And 4 hours, basically, she's breaking down the whole entire thing, the whole entire sordid ordeal about what a disaster it was. And the fact that, most people who went to it said it wasn't even Star Wars. I don't know what this was, but it wasn't Star Wars. And so the whole entire reason that you'd subject yourself to that was to have a Star Wars experience. And you didn't even get that. But because this girl has made this video, you know, this is what's really happened. This is what really went on. This is the truth. The Disney can't cover up the narrative. Disney can't set their own narrative. Because this exists, and they're probably going to strike her eventually or have it taken down. But right now, she's got 6.5 million views on this. And because of that, yep. Hey. But because of that, basically, the narrative is broken. You know, future generations will know exactly what went wrong with the Star Cruiser, and if they reboot it like I've seen articles, then this is for posterity, okay? But it exists, okay? Now, the whole entire
They've reached a verdict
oh
in New York.
uh-huh
They haven't announced it yet.
okay. This is Craig telling me that they reached a verdict in New York, so about the Trump trial. Another thing, you know, but one thing about this, you know, this era that we're living in, okay, if we don't wind up supplanting the mainstream, then they'll be able to set their own narrative. And everything that we went through, everything that they did to our pop culture, everything that they just utterly and completely destroyed will basically, you know, will never be talked about. Just like things that the flower power generation, the you know, the baby boomers have covered up. You know, Jim Jones. You know, Jim Jones was, you know, that's been covered up. It's like, oh, this crazy guy took a bunch of people to French Guiana. And, well, that guy happened to be one of the biggest socialists in America. The People's Temple was a socialist organization. And it was basically, at one point, it was so big in California that it was practically the welfare system in California. Jerry Brown has got pictures of him, and I have pictures of him with Jim Jones. But, of course, they got buried. But that happened, okay? But, yeah, that happened in the flower power generation. You know, it happened during the baby boomers. It happened to all this peaceniks or whatever, these peaceful people, evidently. And, you know, and all this stuff, man, you know, all these narratives that have gone on, you know, the fact that when you grow up, you hear all this stuff about the Smithsonian, okay? And it never occurred to me how shady the Smithsonian is, because I grew up, you know, being told, you know, I went to Washington, D.C., and we did the tour of 3 museums of the Smithsonian, and just believed it was just a museum system. But you know what? It has an enforcement arm, and it's actively gathering stuff from culture and memory holding it. And those activities are really shady. Okay. But I was growing up, you know, it's in my textbook telling me the Smithsonian is this cool place, you know, and all it is the National Archive. You know, nothing to see here, right? You know, the whole, you know, the Titanic, you know, when I was growing up, I heard the Titanic narrative, you know, oh, it's tragic. All these people got on this ship and it sunk. And, you know, it's just awful that happened. It was just fluke. It was a freak accident. But then you find out all this stuff about, you know, there was a ship nearby and it broke in half. And the only way that could have happened is if it had damage amidships, you know, and a iceberg was not going to do it. It had to be an explosion. And so, so torpedo maybe, you know, back then they had like torpedoes were basically mines, is what they called torpedoes. But it hit something amidships that caused it to break in two when it started sinking. And we've got the wreckage to say so. And people that viewed the wreckage have said, hey, that midships, that looks like an explosion. That doesn't look like an impact. So there's that. History has nuance. Okay, history has nuance. Now, if Kathleen Kennedy goes into the wild blue yonder, into retirement, the most successful female studio head of all time, which is the narrative I've heard, and nobody is there to say, okay, well, she sank the biggest franchises of all time deliberately. The whole entire way, the past has to die, kill it if you have to, is words out of her own mouth. And, if she goes into retirement, nobody gives a pushback, then nobody's going to know the damage that she's done. Nobody's going to know it. And she'll just be like, they'll rewrite the history books and have her praised, right? Unless people speak out. People don't let the narrative die, unless people, say, hey, Star Wars was here. And at the time when she quit, or when she retired successfully, it was here, I was, a Star Wars nut. I had all the figures. I bought everything that Star Wars came out with. Every movie that came out, every television show, I watched it the first day. I was excited. I had my Yoda ears, and I was huge. And then next thing you know, I was being told that Star Wars is no longer for me. The Force is female. Unless somebody, speaks this truth, they're going to be able to rewrite the history, okay? Unless somebody speaks the truth and pushes back. All these voices on the YouTube for as long as we're allowed to be on YouTube. Because YouTube is where people go for their news. YouTube is where people go for their entertainment, commentary. YouTube is where everybody is going for their how-to videos, and YouTube is where we gather now. We don't gather in front of the television anymore, and evidently we don't go to movie theaters very much anymore. Looking at the box office numbers from last weekend. And so where are we gathering? We're gathering around like these small videos, small creators, people in their garage, people in their back bedroom with their laundry on the couch. People like me, saying, hey, if we don't, talk about history, we're going to be doomed to repeat it. If we don't talk about this ESG program and how it completely totally gutted pop culture and how these locusts came in and ruined all these industries, if we don't talk about that, then it's going to happen again. Okay? It's going to happen again. And unless we sound the alarm, unless we keep it in the public consciousness, unless we say something about it and say, well, if you hear this narrative that that the reason why the acolyte failed is because of the masculine Star Wars fans, which is what Kathleen Kennedy just said in an interview, that if Acolyte fails, it will be because of these male Star Wars fans. Like there's enough male Star Wars fans left to make a dent. But she's already setting that narrative up, and she's already saying this is why it's going to fail, because she knows it's going to fail. They reshot that thing like 4 times. Reshot it. Rewrote it. Brought in new actors and new narratives, trying to fix this god-awful mess that Leslie Headland made, and they can't do it. So now it's like, okay, well, let's just put it out, get it over with, like they did with Echo. Echo was reshot multiple times. Captain America 4 is being reshot as we speak. and it's supposed to come out next year. They've changed the name 4 times. They've changed the villains. They've changed multiple things, trying to make this fly. Even though Bucky should have got the shield. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows Bucky should have got the shield. But they're basically determined that Falcon Cap's going to work, and so they're throwing everything into it. You know what? No matter how much money they're going to throw at it, it's not going to fly. It's not going to. I'm sorry. That was a pun. That was a bad pun. But the bottom line, though, is if we let them rewrite the narratives, if we let them tell people what happened, why Star Wars went into obscurity, why this juggernaut of an IP evaporated in a course of 6 or 7 years, why they went from the pinnacle to a complete and utter invalidity and being completely totally useless. And why did that happen? It happened because of poor management. It happened because the lady that George Lucas left in charge of it ran it into the ground, tried to make it something it wasn't. Doctor Who. Doctor Who. Look what's happening with that. They're already starting up their narratives. They're already establishing their excuses for why that's not flying right now. Misogyny, homophobia, fill in the blank. Bottom line is it good? And if it's not good, why isn't it good? Okay, if the acting's subpar, get better actors. If the writing is subpar, get better writers. And if everything is not running smoothly, get a new showrunner or a new studio head. It's not brain surgery. It's the way it's happened. It's the way it's worked all this time. But now, because of ESG, DEI, basically they can't fire these people that are incompetent. Because they weren't hired for competency. They were hired because, or who they screw. That's why they were hired. They weren't hired for competency. They weren't hired for a track record. They weren't hired because they had done these smaller things and built up to this. They were hired because, hey, you check this, and check this, and check that. Oh, yes. Great. Come on in. Hey, ESG, we've look at these check boxes we've got. Look at our ESG rating. Give us money. And then it's shit because the ingredients were shit. And if we don't tell people that's why it happened, then they'll be able to rewrite the history. They'll be able to say COVID happened. They'll be able to say MAGA happened. And it changed everybody's taste overnight. And because everybody turned into islamophobes, and we weren't able to adjust because we're not evil enough to, to pivot and give them what they want, because what they want is evil and vile. So it's not our fault. It's that they're so horrible that we can't adjust to meet their goal or what their desires are, because all their desires are wrong. They can rewrite that. Okay. Gamergate is a good example of this. Gamergate's been their boogeyman. All this time we hear Gamergate this, Gamergate that. Oh, it's another Gamergate. But when you look at because the people in the mainstream that fought against the gamers, and lost, have had the ability to write the narrative, then you believe the gamers were the ones that lost, and the gamers actually made the changes that they were demanding. And the reason why after they made those changes that the gamers were demanding, it became the biggest, pop culture entity on the planet. Gaming is bigger than movies, bigger than television, bigger than in online streaming. But now they're all up in it. AAA gaming is all just infected with it. And because of that, it's going downhill. Because you can't put crap into a blender and make chocolate souffle. You can't. That's what they're trying to do. And they're going to rewrite the narrative and going to say, Gamergate 2, we failed because of Gamergate 2. Not because of these woke, subsidized companies with enforcing ESG parameters, getting into writers' rooms and forcing character changes. Hey, you know what? We're going to do a game, and it's going to be set in medieval samurai era Japan. I know. Let's make it a black gay samurai. Let's take this obscure footnote in history and not only make him a samurai, but we're going to make him gay. And he's going to be the lead character. And oh, by the way, the ninja chick is going to be gay too. Why? Because the Sweet Baby Inc. is in the development team. And direct link to ESG. All roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to Larry Fink and BlackRock and Vanguard. All of it. And, they bailed out the country in 2008, and they've been dictating what the country does ever since. But if we don't say anything, if we don't keep the narrative alive, if we let them write the history, then 10, 15, 20 years down the road, then it will be like this attempt to save culture that was thwarted by all these evil incels and misogynists and racists. And we tried to save society. We tried for utopia. We tried to create utopia, and they thwarted us at every time we tried, everything we tried, they thwarted it. And eventually, for our own self-preservation, to get the profits back up so we could continue existing, we had to go back to the misogynist and racist and fill in the blank material that we got away from. So we had to go back because they're so bad and they're so evil, and they wouldn't support us in trying to save the world and trying to, climate change. And they'll rewrite the narrative. And Saint Kathleen Kennedy will get her crown. It'll be Saint Kathleen. Do you want that? Do you want this lady who used Star Wars as her feminine product and then walked away with accolades and kudos? Do you want her to be able to say, in future generations that, she was this great studio head that tried to save culture and we wouldn't let her do it? Unless we push back, she's going to be able to do that. She's going to be able to write that narrative. And the mainstream is going to be able to say whatever they want to about the culture war. We can't do the halfway. We can't do this halfway. We have to go all the way to the wall. We have to win. This is not a détente. This is not us negotiating a surrender. We have to win the culture war. Otherwise, future generations are going to turn around and the ESG program is going to be back. And who knows? There won't be enough of us left to stave it off next time. And culture will be over. Unless there's going to be enough people in the next generation that knows about what happened in this generation to stop it. Because they're going to try again. This isn't the first time they've tried stuff like this. And it won't be the last. Okay? So, anyway, what's next? We have to start creating a parallel history. And so people will know what really happened. And that's my sermon for the day. All righty, thank you everybody for coming. This weekend's going to be very busy around the rabbit hole. I'm going to help them, help the Broken Compass guys launch the Magnificent Bastards 2. It's going to be on Good Stuff's channel. I'm going to pop in and I'm going to I did a review of Magnificent Bastards 1. When I get off here, I'm going to isolate that and create a video for them to play. And, I highly suggest you guys go by there. And Monday or Friday night at 9 o'clock, Cryptids and Conspiracies second show is going to be online. And it's going to be about the Brown Mountain Lights, one of the most stable psychological phenomenon on the planet. It's one of the only stable what is the word I'm looking for here? Supernatural happening. One of the only ones in the world where it's so consistent that if you go up there tonight, you're probably going to see it. You may or may not see it, but there's a chance you might see it. There's nowhere else in the world that's that consistent. There might be a couple more spots, but this is one of the ones that scientists have been studying for generations. And there's reports of it going all the way back into pre-colonial Indian times. We're going to talk about it. And I happen to be close by. I'm within driving distance of it. So I've got some insight from locals that I can draw upon. It's going to be a very interesting show. 9 o'clock on the Rabbit Hole tomorrow night, also on the Wiki Fever channel. He's going to simulcast. And it'll also be on Rumble, I believe. Maybe. I don't know. Might be on Rumble. We may go to Rumble exclusive if we get more pushback from YouTube about it. We might even go Rumble exclusive with that show. We've already got the Wiki Bunny show, which is Rumble exclusive. Also, going to be on the Wiki Fever show noon on Saturday, and also 9 o'clock the Wiki and Bunny show. And so it's going to be a busy couple of days. Got some other stuff planned. Try to get back in my shorts program. But, we'll find out. But thank you all for coming that have showed up. And didn't get any comments today. Hopefully that's not because of people, not wanting to, say anything. I don't know. Hopefully there'll be some feedback down the road. I might be just doing this for posterity, but I think somebody needs to talk about it, which is why I am. But thank you all for coming, and thank you to Fluffiest Chat and all of YouTube, even though you didn't chat today. And we will see you next time. Remember, follow the White Rabbit. Bye, everybody.